Okay, so when you're setting your guide, you're going to talk to your client for your A-line bob. And again, you're going to go through your various checkpoints. Is your client's shoulders resting evenly? Are their legs tilted, or are they crossing their legs? Are they tilting over or slouching? All these factors need to be taken into account when you're setting your guide and cutting the hair. Because if your client folds their legs and crosses their legs, it sets their spine off balance. And then because their spine is not straight and they're not sitting straight, your haircut will come out with the same tilt as their spine. Okay? So just so to keep in mind, if you're working on a client and you have their head tilted like this and you're cutting like this, and then you tilt their head back and you continue with the same guides and you're cutting, you could technically change the angle in which you're cutting because you've changed the angle in which your head sits. So again, you want to make sure that your client is sitting straight and that everything is in a good place. You want to adjust to make sure you're able to see what you're doing. Okay, let me set this up so you can see what I'm doing. All right. So my client in front was telling me that they want the length in the front to just be as long as possible and nice and full. So I'm looking at my front pieces and I'm seeing how much of a perimeter they're giving me, and I'm noticing that it gets a little sparse. So I'm probably going to take about a ½ inch off, an inch off in the front to set my guide. And you can compare your front piece. And I'm only going to take off about a ½ inch in the front. Let me hold this properly. There we go. And notice how I'm just taking a little piece in the front, like less than a ½ inch. You see this? The reason why I'm taking such a small piece is because I'm keeping in mind that my shape is going to have a slant. So I can't take the full front piece and cut it, or else it'll distort my shape. So I am taking just a little piece so I can set my guide in the front. I told myself I'm only going to take off a ½ inch. And it's very easy. It just came off. And then I'm comparing one side to the other. There we go. Checking for symmetry. It's there. Now I'm looking at my front pieces and I'm comparing them to the back. So depending on where you over direct your front piece to is going to determine how intense your slant's going to be. So you could pull your piece to the back, to the center back, and then cut an inch off the back, or you can line it up to what you have, your guide in the back, and over direct it. And this will give you a less pronounced slant than if it's over directed all the way to the center. You're also asking your client what they want. For the sake of this client here, and for the sake of me doing more bob cuts on her, I'm going to take off really just the minimum amount for the front and the back to give me my cohesive cut. So it's about an inch and a half in the back that's going to get taken off. And notice how it matches to my length. So now I'm going to create my perimeter using my guides that I've set. Again, combing. I can even take a look at my front piece, see where my front piece is, see where my back piece is, and see how much I need to take off so I can start sculpting it out. So I'm pulling out to my 45 degree, making sure my guide falls out, and then I cut. Bringing my piece, notice how I'm over directing everything back. And I see my guide there, and as my guide drops out, I sculpt what I'm gonna cut. I'm pulling my fingers out, I'm letting my guide drop, and then I cut. The challenge is letting your guide drop, okay? Because people are afraid to let their guide drop. Oh, it's gonna be too long. It's better for it to be too long. You go back, you detail it. You can always detail it with your shears if you need to. It's better to have it a little long and then detail it later than for you to cut your guide and have to start over, and then you risk making it too short or distorting your shape. So again, I'm looking at my front piece, I'm looking at my back piece. I'm pulling out to my 45 degrees, I'm letting my hair drop out, and I'm slowly etching away here. And then again, I'm going to check for symmetry. Making sure I'm over directing the hair back. Letting my guide drop out. Making sure I match. All right. So I'm looking at my shape, and I'm noticing it's not very pronounced in this corner. I might have to take it in just a little bit more so the shape of it looks a little bit more obvious. All right. So now that your guide is set, you can continue in your A shape. You can drop your subsections. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the style razor so you can see how to use the style razor. Let me open this guy up. I haven't opened it before, so I should have probably opened it before, but...
The flap open.
Is the slide open?
No, it pops open. The flap.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Thank you for your assistance. That was just like, that was the most awkward unboxing in life. All right. Great. So you're taking your subsections here. You're pulling out to your 45 degree. You're letting your guide drop out and you cut. Making sure that you're consistently damp throughout. Again, you're making sure you don't distort your shape. You can see where your guide of the sides are. You can see your start point and your end point. Ooh. Let me get this closer so you can see. You can see your start point here and your end point. You pull out to your 45 degrees, you let your guide drop out, you cut. See, look at that. And again, just like I always do in all my cuts, I go from side to side, quadrant to quadrant. The reason why is because it allows me, make sure that I don't put my guide up. It allows me to be able to check for symmetry as I'm moving along. Again, with these types of cuts, the precision factor of it is what's valued in these cuts. So it's much easier to check as you're going along in the 2 sections at a time, as opposed to doing one whole side and then trying to match that one whole side and then checking in between. Because if you made a mistake or anything, it's going to be harder to correct once you're further along than if you're doing it as you go. So again, we're pulling out to our 45-degree angle. We're looking at our start point, our end point. We're letting it drop out. Checking again for symmetry. And when you're working with a razor, it's really, it's not as accurate as shears because you're guesstimating about where your guide is, as opposed to opening and closing your thumb, giving yourself a straight line. So this seems a little less intuitive, but if you use it correctly, you get these really, really, really pretty cuts that look very natural. Again, making sure you're consistently damp. You're going to be spraying a lot when you're working with a razor. And you can always take stuff in pieces. You don't have to make the whole cut at the same time. If it's too big of a section, give yourself that grace and take a smaller section so you can control it. Not a problem. Not a problem. You let your guide drop out, you cut. Now, whether you decide to do one swoop or slowly etch it out, that is your choice. As long as the hair is damp, you're using a fresh new razor, this will not damage the hair. If your razor is dull or if your hair is dry, it will tug and pull on your client. Yes, I am. This is an A-line sectioning, so if you see the A shape is being formed. So
I wanted to see if you're still working in the A shape.
I am. And I'm going to be working in the A shape also when I transition from front to back, from back to front. All right. And again, I'm pulling my hair out to my 45-degree angle. I'm watching my section drop out. And I slowly take in the pieces. Again, I'm making sure I'm not cutting into the guide that I've already set. And now again, I'm checking for symmetry. We're good. We're in a good place. Nice. Guess what I'm not doing with this hair? I'm not pulling these sides, the perimeter, out to a 45-degree angle to the side. That's what I'm not doing. What I am doing is when I take this perimeter, I pull it back and over direct it back to what we set. So this is how you distort your shape, and you don't realize when it happens is that you're pulling a section out to the incorrect area and you're not over directing it back to the place where you need to maintain the shape. So with your A-lines, the trick to it is always over directing back to your shortest pieces. So you want to make sure that you're elevated at your 45 degrees. You let your guide drop out.
You're directing back to the shortest piece every time?
Yes, I'm directing back to basically the back center. So everything that I'm pulling back to the back center, and I'm lifting it to like about a 45 degree to over direct it back. Whereas I've seen students, they pull their side out to here, and then they cut it and they go, well, it's at a 45, and it's true, it is at a 45, but it's not over directed back at the 45. Okay? Does that make sense? Alrighty. So now I'm getting into past the occipital bone. And if your client wants a conservative stack where the stack looks cohesive and in one shape, not layered or textured, once you get out of the occipital range, if you were doing a conservative cut, you would only pull it out to the 45 degrees that you've cut, and then you would cut it in. Now, for a more aggressive stack, a more layered haircut, which is what we're doing today, is I'm taking my guide and I'm pulling it out to closer to a 90, and I'm letting my guide fall out, and I'm cutting my layers in. Okay? So, same with my other piece here. I can take a vertical section. I can pull it out to about a 90. Watch my guide drop out. Make my cuts. And notice I'm getting to the corner here. And notice how my guide on the bottom has already dropped out. And I'm looking at what I have here, of where my previous guide is and what I have. And I let my guide drop out. I slowly make my cut. Boom. Look at how nice that looks. Just falls right into place. All right, so we're continuing with the layering because she wants more of a stack. She wants it to look more contemporary as opposed to traditional. Pulling your hair, taking the centerpiece, you're taking it out at 90, letting your guide drop out. Again, you're over directing the hair back to the centermost part of the head in the back, letting your guide drop out, cut. Once you get to your perimeter, you ensure that you're not cutting into your perimeter to distort your shape. So once you get closer to your perimeter, instead of pulling out to a 90, drop it down to make sure it's meeting up to your front length pieces. Again, remaining consistent with my A-shaped parting. Picking up the hair, pulling it to a 90 degree, letting my guide drop out and cut. And if you get lost, just drop the section and look at where your other guide is so you know that you don't take off too much. Then you're checking for symmetry. Taking my centermost piece, looking at where my guide is. I can see it right here. I don't know if you can see it. I can see my guide right here. and then it drops out, right? You saw it drop out? Watching your guide drop out.
I'm sorry if keep asking questions, but can you explain one more time about the watching your guide drop out? It's because you don't want to cut it shorter than the guide.
Correct, because if your guide doesn't fall out, that means that you're cutting your guide. And you don't want to do that. So quite literally, you have to watch the previous section that you put in fall out of your hands before you cut. And you have to ensure that that happens, or else you're inadvertently making your guide shorter. So you're always letting that guide fall before you make your cuts. All right. Finishing up here. So you can always be safe and take a look at how the top layer lines up with what you have. If you want to be safe with it, and make sure your shape isn't distorted, you can always take it down to 0 and see what you've already cut in and get rid of the extra so you know that the shape is there. That's totally fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. And then what you can do here is you pull the rest of your hair, and depending, again, on how textured, how layered we're going for. Right now I'm doing a 90 degree, I was doing a 90 degree, but now that we're up into the crown area and in the apex, that hair is being over directed to what was previously cut at 90. So this at the top of the apex is not at 90, okay? This is, the top apex is about a 45, and around the crown we're at a 90. And then you can see where your guide is. You can let your guide drop out, and then you can make your cut, and then you can put over direct your section back, watch your guide drop out, and you can match what you have. Again, taking the hair that was elevated at a 90 from the center, over directing what's at the top back to it, letting the guide drop out, and matching into my previously cut sections. Great. So now we're transitioning to the front. Again, we're going to be observing the A shaping. Be observing the A shape. We've already put in the guide, so we're just checking to see if it lines up nicely, and it does. We're going to take a look at the other cross section, knowing that I'm doing my sectioning diagonal forward. So if you notice, when it meets into something else, it would make the A shape. So it's meeting into the back, and that creates the A shape. You see what I'm saying here? So around the ears, your sectioning should look like an A shape. Let's see how much length we have here. And it's looking like she's running out of length, which is very common with these types of haircuts. And this is more of detailing because her front end was already a little textured and a little layered. So you're just dropping the section, making sure it meets up to what you have. You also, in your consultation, will have discussed whether the client is going to be receiving, if the client is going to be getting bangs, or what their fringe or fringe, if you feel like eating British, darling, what the fringe is going to look like, or the bangs. All right, so it looks like I can pretty much just drop what I have here because the length is in a place where it's going to just go with what I have. Yeah. So what you can do now is you can double check your sections. You can see there's a couple little scraggles. You can make sure that they are uniform. And now you can choose to texturize the front pieces into what you have in the back. And you do that by over directing the hair back. And you can take a look at what you got going on down the centermost mohawk of the head. And you can see where the hair starts to get a little long. And then you can see where it drops out, and then you can take the little corner off. So what I did there is I'm taking my front piece from the very front of the head, and generally what I'm doing here is I'm doing it in the crown. I'm not touching the sides, because in most clients, these sides, you need them to be full so it keeps the shape. So you're very rarely, when you're doing an A-line, unless the hair is extremely dense, you won't be layering anything past the parietal ridge. So this is where you comb this back in the crown area. A good way to determine is if with the little, with the tilt of the brow, if you got your, and you can comb that straight back. Notice how your shape is intact everywhere else. Combed it straight back, everything basically in the crown. And I'm looking at where my layers sit. And then I'm identifying the long pieces, and I'm just cutting them right off. I'm looking at my pieces. I'm pulling them back to my center back piece, which was where my original guide was. Checking where the little scraggles are, and I am making them even with the layering in the back. So we have a smooth transition between the front layers and the back layers. All right, so this haircut is finished. This haircut is finished. I'm gonna blow dry it during the break, and you can see what it looks like and how much. I gave her a little bit of a stack. Her shortest layer sits about where the occipital bone is, her shortest layer in the back. You can't really see it because, again, with the razor, you get really, really nice layering that's kind of seamless. So when you see it blow dried, you'll see the shape a little bit more. But as you can see, we are transitioning from a shorter length in the back into a longer A-line in the front. I know she's blonde, so it's a little hard to see, but you can see the length here. You can see the back. All right, great. So I'm gonna go ahead and dismiss the break. I'll see everyone back at 7:30, and it should be dry by then. And we can go over more texturizing techniques, and I'll show you the finalizing while it's blow dry on how you can just kind of give it some extra detail so your client feels really good, like you paid some extra good attention while you were cutting, okay? All right, see everyone back at 7:30.